Have you ever wondered the canonical ages of each partner in Paper Mario? Probably not, but I'm bored and I want to think about it myself, so this is what this video will be dedicated towards. Just understand that I'm only talking about the first 2 Paper Marios, though if some of you want to speculate the ages for Tippy, Kirsty, Olivia, and Huey, well, be my guest. With this all said, let's start with the Paper Mario with 1,000 Year Door Partners and Goombella. Now, Goombella actually would not be very difficult to figure out her age. You could actually get pretty precise if you wanted to be. Goombella has gone on record to say that she is a junior at the University of Goom. If we're to assume that she graduated from high school at the age of 18, and she was studying a 4-year term in college, then that would mean that she would be either 20 or 21 years old. And yes, I am going by human years, because heck if I know how long Goombas actually live for. We sadly don't have much else to go off of, though. Originally, I thought there'd be something there if you were to look at the Chocola because that could be considered alcoholic, but it's decidedly not that. It's really just soda. If it was alcoholic, then we could pinpoint Goombella's age to be 21, since at least in America, that's the minimum drinking age. After Goombella is Koops. With the knowledge that Koops' father, Koopley, had left to fight Hooktail 10 years ago, before Mario and Koops go on to finish what Koopley started, we can from this guarantee that Koops is at least 10 years old. However, it is likely that he's a fair bit older than 10 years, as he also has a girlfriend in Koopy Koo, further increasing the range of age to the late teens. However, judging by Goombella's dialogue when she writes to Mario in an email in the epilogue, it is possible that he's also just less mature than he should be for his age, as Goombella remarks on him being more of an adult at the end of the game. Goombella also comments on how Koopy Koo mothers Koops, which would imply that Koopy Koo is older than her boyfriend, but that doesn't really tell us very much. What does tell us a lot though is that Koops actually wants to be the mayor of Heidelberg, and the minimum age requirement to be mayor is either 18 or 21. However, I'm gonna lowball him here because of Koopy Koo, because her losing her temper in Chapter 1 would make a lot more sense if she was a younger woman. With Madame Flurry, there is one thing we know for a fact. She's old. However, despite this, she's not quite geriatric. Like, she's old, but not that old. That being said, it's very difficult to get a good read on her age. As an actress, she has to make sure to take care of her body, and invests a lot in makeup and accessories to make her look more appealing. But given her many years of working as an actress, I think it's fair to say that she's in her late 40s or early 50s, which I think is actually a pretty fair estimate considering that Flurry isn't retired either. In the post-game, she's shown returning to her acting career after helping Mario save the world, which again adds to my point that Flurry can't possibly be that old. I don't know, maybe you think I'm hard underselling her age, but like, she looks good. Guys, let's be real. Do we really need to talk about Yoshi's age? We may not have been there for when he was first conceived, but we were there before he was born. There's no disputing it. He's age 0. End of story. When it comes to age ranges, Vivian might have the absolute largest one. As a member of the Three Shadows, a triad that had to be created by the Shadow Queen before she was sealed away for 1,000 years, it stands to reason that Vivian is at least 1,000 years old. This is further confirmed by the fact that Vivian actually testifies to finding the Palace of Shadow's storeroom to be familiar to her, meaning that for a fact, Vivian must have been in the Palace of Shadow before it was sealed off. And it couldn't have been after the fact, because Belda makes it a point to say that Mario opened the 1,000-year door for her, meaning the Palace of Shadow was inaccessible to Beldam prior. Now obviously, as the youngest member of the Three Shadows, she'd have to be younger than both Beldam and Marilyn, but that doesn't really tell us anything. And the rest of Vivian's dialogue sadly isn't really good for much. But still, I imagine that at least 1,000 years old is fairly accurate. For Admiral Bobbery, we know for a fact that he's been a seafarer for many years. And judging by his entirely gray mustache, I suspect him to be in his 50s, maybe his late 50s. There otherwise really isn't a lot to go off of. He is a widower as his wife Scarlet had passed away while he was at sea, but we don't know how long they've been married for, and they had no confirmed children, so the range for Bobbery's age is actually fairly wide. Before getting into the Paper Mario 64 partners, we have to talk about Miss Mouse first. Not much is really known about her beyond the fact that she owns her own business in the lovely House of Badges, which makes me think she's in her early 30s. Maybe late 20s, but again, it's kind of hard to really tell. However, it is possible that she's actually a fair bit younger than that, as there's actually a little mouser in Podley's place that admits to having a crush on Miss Mouse. He also admits to falling for Lala, who works at the Pianta parlor, and she's 18 years old on the dot. So Miss Mouse may not even be in her 20s, or if she is, she'd be in her early 20s, maybe even her late teens. And that would actually make me much more sure of Koops' age as well. Oh yeah, and fun fact, the Lil Mouser in Polly's place is also the ex-boyfriend of the Toad waitress on the SS Express. Before jumping into the Paper Mario 64 partners, I'd like to give a thank you to my channel members, MD Switchy, Nintendo Sixty-Jorts, and Koi13. It really does mean the world to me. Leading off the Paper Mario 64 partners, we have Goombario. Goombario is a young Goomba with a little sister, a pair of parents, and a pair of grandparents. He is said to not be a child anymore by Goomba, but he's also expressed interest in playing with Merlo, the younger brother of Merlovely, who is presumably very young. This makes it fairly tricky to figure out his age actually, but considering how much of his family is still around, I think it's actually a fair estimate to say that Goombario is 12 years old. This could be considered underselling his age because Goombario has proven himself to be extremely knowledgeable, but I've personally been under the belief that children are just really smart. And Goombario does take a lot of time to listen to both his Goompa and his Goompapa, so it could be said that he gets a lot of his experience and head knowledge from them. Goombario also doesn't like the taste of fish, which is something that a lot of children find to be gross. So I'm actually fairly confident in saying that Goombario is not even a teenager yet. And plus, if you still have any doubts, look at the hat he's wearing. He is totally a Pokemon protagonist. And in the world of Pokemon, you are basically an adult before you become a teenager. It's just the law. Now on to Cooper, there are a few things to figure out for him. According to his mail, he does have a mother, so he can't really be that old. He also has a fan who seems to really want to meet him, and judging by the formatting of the letter, they're likely female, meaning Cooper may have a secret admirer in his future. As a result, he's on the market for dating. He's also got a fair bit of fashion with his neckerchief and his wristband, so I'd say he's not quite an adult, but he is pretty far along as far as teenage years are concerned. I'd estimate he's hovering around the age of 15 to 16 years old. Still fairly young, but not too young. Proceeding to Bombette, we know she used to work in the Koopa Bros Fortress before the Bob-ombs were overworked because of Bowser's influence. She also has a devoted admirer in Bruce the Bob-omb who really loves her, though this really does not amount to very much. There really aren't a lot of other characters that are related to Bombette, but if I had to estimate her age, I think saying that she's in her late 20s is a pretty fair guess. Onward to Parakarry, it's fairly implied that he worked at the post office for quite some time. However, when looked side by side by his superior, he can't possibly be that old. Otherwise, not much about Parakarry really sticks out as extraordinary, so I'd say he's really about 35, maybe just mid-30s in general. Very run-of-the-mill as far as age goes. Ladybug. A question I'll always be compelled to ask is how the heck do you gauge the age of a ghost, someone that's supposed to be dead? But I gotta figure something out. So, Bo is said to be the princess of the Boos in her domain. Bootler also describes Bo as a fine young girl, which makes me think that she would be in her early 20s. Maybe late 20s because Bo is shown to be fairly well traveled and experienced, and as a leader, it would make more sense for her to be on the older side. But to be honest, her age always read to me as more indeterminate, as in an age can't really be determined, even though being in her 20s seems like a pretty fair estimate. Now, to bring up Watt, I think it's safe to say that Watt is very, very young. Not only is her speech super childlike, but she still has a pacifier in her mouth. I cannot see her being any older than 2 years old. Otherwise, we know she has a mother, but we don't really know anything about her mother beyond the fact that she has a daughter. But yeah, 2 years of age, that's what I'm sticking to. Then there's Sushi, and we actually have a fair amount of information to go off of here. Sushi was hired to be a babysitter for the Yoshis on Lava Lava Island, so she's definitely at a working age. But that also means she's unlikely to be retired. We also know, however, that Sushi's a mother and she's expecting a granddaughter, so if her daughter is old enough to have children of her own, then Sushi absolutely has to be at least 40 years old. I'd probably estimate her mid-40s, but really anywhere in that range I say it would be fair game. And now we've arrived at Lakalester. There are two things we know about him. One, he has a girlfriend named Lakalulu, which puts him in the range of late teen or early adulthood. He was also allied with Huff and Puff, saying he wanted to be a part of something big, which would suggest that he's very self-conscious, which also further indicates that he's rather young. For that matter, he's very impressionable considering how he reacts to Mario whenever you tell him why you're fighting. So I'd say he's older than Cooper, but not quite as old as Bombette. Basically either 19 or 20 years old. Of course, this is just how I would interpret their ages, but you may think differently from me. But I had fun.